Welcome to Hauntcore Vault. If you are ready for horror tales, you are in the right place. If you are new, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know where are you from and what time you are watching. Let's begin. My grandpa opened this place almost 97 years ago. I inherited it when he passed a decade or so ago, given that my father didn't want anything to do with the place. And since then, I've made sure to diligently follow his final wish. He might have left me the theater, but there was one condition. Not that it would be enforceable if I went against his wish. More about that later. But the condition was present nonetheless. Never, ever let the film stop running in screen 6. Now, I'd practically grown up in that theater, given it was a nice little hangout spot after closing time, but I never knew anything about the existence of a 6th screen. It had always been 5. Grandpa left that sentence and a little picture guide to find the controls for that screen, as well as the security footage system for it. He also left a letter, only to be opened once I had been running the theater for long enough to understand the importance of screen 6. It baffled me at the time, but I kept that wish too and tucked the letter away. He never told me where to find the screen itself either. The first thing I did was check the cameras, only to find they showed nothing of interest. No moviegoers were present in this secret little screen, nor were any employees. The black and white footage from the vantage point of a camera positioned above the screen of a silent, empty room filled with rows and rows and endless rows of dusty chairs stared back at me. Somehow it was larger than all of our other screens. After unlocking the neat little contraption he described, I realized the system for that screen was digital. Strange, I mumbled, given the fact our theater was always quite proud of being the only film-only establishment in town. I suppose digital files make running the screen endlessly an easier task. Something jumped out at me, though. The digital file being used to loop over and over was just that, a singular file. It wasn't cycling through a library of movies. The same one was playing, over and over. The file name? Sacrifice.mxf. I've always been a curious person, and part of me wanted to resist. Some instinct was screaming at me to stop, but I couldn't. I had to take a glimpse at the little outdated screen synced up to the projector. It was grainy and degraded, footage that looked like it had been shot in the mid-20th century or so. A group of men dressed in black and women dressed in white circled a tree with interlocked hands. They looked like they were speaking, maybe singing. Regardless, there was no audio. They went round and round this great old tree for what felt like forever, before stopping in their tracks and just standing there for a minute or two. The footage cut an unspecified amount of time forward to reveal their black and white garments blowing in the wind as they hung from various branches of the tree. All of them. It didn't matter that there wasn't any audio. I could feel the silence seeping out of that screen. Cut to black. Part of me was horrified, and another part retained some morbid sense of fascination with what I had seen. I wasn't planning on going against Grandpa's wishes anyway, but at least I'd seen something that spooked me enough to justify the strangeness of it all. Was that the entire film that had been playing over and over for God knows how long? How was such a massive auditorium just hidden away somewhere? What the fuck was that video? I needed to find out. God, I wish I hadn't, but I did. The next few weeks were spent meticulously researching everything I could possibly find about our little family-owned theater. My little theater. I spent hours on end in that projector room trying to make sense of what was being played. The footage described above was alone, but remained similar to the others I've since seen. All feature large groups of people in what looks like pre-war Europe. 1930 or so is my best guess. They start off peaceful enough, almost joyous, but I've learned by now to reject the faux happiness depicted. It grabs a hold of you before the violent sacrifices that soon follow rip your heart out. Sometimes I wonder about the people shown. There are so many of them across the different short films, probably more than I've known in my entire lifetime. All of them met such gruesome end. It might sound easy to throw away their collective existence as mere pixels on a screen, but I can't.
The local newspaper allowed me access to their archive to find out a little more, and things began to tie themselves together. I had to sift through cardboard box after cardboard box to find what I'd been looking for, but I eventually did. Back in 1931, there had been an awful incident at our theater. At the time, it was owned by Grandpa, and things were looking up, given it was the only establishment of its kind in town. Unfortunately, something terrible was to happen soon. It was a cool October evening when local police were alerted to a disturbance down at the movie theater by terrified patrons. You see, back then there was a Screen 6. Nestled right next to Screen 5, it was the focal selling point as a state-of-the-art screen, showing only the finest films. Those in Screen 5 began to realize something was badly wrong when the sound of an incessantly crying and screaming child began to drown out the more pleasant sound of their film. The talkies, as films with spoken audio were known in their 1930s heyday, were a phenomenon, and it took a lot to distract those in Screen 5 from their entertainment. The child screamed for as long as it could until annoyance turned to worry and eventually fear. By the time police swung open the double doors to Screen 6, the leather-white seats were soaked in crimson-red blood, and the patrons inside had long since taken their last breaths. Except one. Still, the child screamed. I've always been open-minded when it comes to the unseen, not a believer per se, but not dismissive of the idea. Things began to come into a clearer focus. Hundreds of people had sacrificed themselves in that screen all those years ago, and now the screen is forever condemned to forever playing films of similar occurrences. The two had to be connected. The letter. It was time to open the letter. I was convinced I'd satisfied Grandpa's requirement for doing so, and it would fill in the parts of this deranged story I was missing. I slipped the letter out of its glum, off-white envelope and began to read. To my beloved grandson. By now you probably know much more about the story of our little theater than you did when I left it to you. I'm sorry it took until we were separated for you to learn the truth, but it was something that had to be done. Those people that are in the films playing on Screen 6 were part of an ancient cult. The men of Mephistopheles, they called themselves. They would live in communes, and the peaceful images you've come to see are of their day-to-day lives. And as you have also come to see, they would eventually offer themselves en masse in blood sacrifices. One of these sacrifices happened to take place in Screen 6 of our theater, and once again I'm sure you have come to learn of this, given you are reading this letter. The locations in which these sacrifices take place are forever bound to the souls lost there in some form or another. To illustrate, that great big tree in one of the films is now the site of countless suicides. Their crime? Daring to walk where the men of Mephistopheles once walked, and where they left this earth? Our particular curse happens to be that Screen 6 began to be the site of similar suicides, and so did our other screens. We could never figure out why they weren't contained to the immediate site of the original sacrifice, but needed to find a way to stop them. Times were tough, and the money the theater brought in was important to all of our lives. An occultist suggested the endless film screening as a way to stem the flow whilst we found a more permanent solution, but before long we realized it stopped the awful goings-on entirely. So we let the films play, and then play some more. Screen 6 had originally been downstairs, since the building only allowed for that kind of space down there, so we turned it into a tomb. Maybe the misguided souls lost there found some peace in the dusty catacomb of a theater left behind. Now, if you know the story of the sacrifice at our theater, you know there was a singular child who survived it all. That child, your father. I'm so sorry for keeping the truth locked away from you the way I did. You deserved to know whilst I was still there with you. Please know I only ever had your best interests at heart. I love you always, Poppy. It's been a few weeks since I found out the truth about our small-town theater. Sleeping has been difficult because of the endless nightmares, as has bothering to keep up maintenance of the place. Still, though, the film on Screen 6 plays.
I will tell you about the murders my mom witnessed when she was just 12. First, let me tell a bit of background. My grandmother is a Jehovah's Witnesses in the upper class. She was abusive, and my mom cut contact with her when she moved out. When my mother was 12, they frequently attended a place called Mers and Myers, a bed and breakfast/movie theater. This place was mostly attended by middle-aged to elderly people. In fact, my mother was the only child there, as my grandmother was a single mom at the time, and she had to take her. My grandmother was a friend of the owners, 2 old ladies. Those ladies would often joke about the men who entered the building and looked miserable and single. In fact, my mom once heard one say, "He looks so miserable, someone just must put him out of it." According to her, they later offered him to sit down and have some tea, which the man drank. After that, she says she never saw him again. She made a theory that they may have killed him, and that was confirmed when she heard the 2 owners whisper, "Nice trick with the tea. We can end so much suffering with this." My mom was concerned, but kept her knowing to herself, lest risk her mother's wrath. 3 days later, the almost exact thing happened. My mother decided to try to investigate after this. She started to look around the place when they went almost every night for the movie and dinner during summer, and eventually found what she thought was a basement door down a set of stairs when she was exploring one day. She decided to try to explore the basement the next day. The next day, she could barely think of anything else the entire day. She was incredibly anxious and almost called it off, but gained last-minute courage and was determined to explore the basement. That night, they went per usual, and my mother crept into the kitchen and slowly descended the stairs. She opened the door, but, to her relief, nothing was there. She sighed in relief and rested her hand the wall. To her surprise, there was a light switch there that turned on and illuminated the whole room. It took everything she had not to scream and puke. There were at least 20 bodies, killed different ways and hung on meat hooks. Some had hundreds of cuts, others bashed-in skulls, and a few cleanly beheaded. What looked like the most recent 2 had no signs of physical wounds, confirming poison in the tea probably killed them. After about 10 seconds, she switched off the light and prepared to run, but as she started running up, she heard voices.
She quickly ran back down the stairs and into the dark room, then closed the door. To her dismay, the voices continued to approach, and just to be sage, she hid behind an old desk in the corner of the basement. Just then, she heard 2 steps of footsteps down the stairs. They eventually come down and opened the door. It was 2 old ladies carrying a large black bag. This is what she heard while she was hiding behind the desk. "Unzip it. We need to get him up quickly before anybody realizes we're gone." "Yes, I am hurrying. Get the hook ready." Okay, help me lift and hook." She says she then heard a sound like a sword, causing a deep cut, but not being pulled out ever. 23 already. This tea thing is so much easier than our old tactics. Yes, I'll try to make a more potent one soon. Now, let's head back up. They then headed back up, turned off the light, and closed the door. My mother followed about 2 milliseconds after. My mother couldn't sleep, but she thought no one would believe her and said nothing to police. The next day, when they went, about halfway through dinner, a police officer went up to their table to talk to the ladies. This is what transpired. "Hello, ladies. You are the owners, right?" "Yes, we are. What can we do for you?" "We have had some missing persons reports and have a warrant to search this facility, including the theater, kitchen, motel rooms, and dining area. Please lower the amount of people in the building tomorrow so we can conduct our search." "Sounds good, officers. Anything else?" "That will be all. Have a nice day." "Wait! Would you like some tea? It's our own special blend." "Sure, thank you. We will be off now. Goodbye." Goodbye. No police arrived the next day. My grandmother, not wanting to risk being arrested for being friends of the owners and knowing of the crimes committed and not saying anything, stopped attending after that day. A week later, there was a story in the news about how there was a SWAT raid on the place, and those 2 old ladies killed 2 SWAT members in the raid before they both committed suicide. The murders must have been covered up by police because they were never mentioned. I wish it could have ended with less death, but the world isn't fair.
This story begins on what should have been an ordinary summer evening. It was July 2021 in Corona, California. 2 young souls, full of dreams and potential, entered a movie theater to enjoy a film together. 18-year-old Riley Goodrich and 19-year-old Anthony Barajas were seated in the Regal Edwards Theater, watching a screening of The Forever Purge, a dystopian thriller meant to entertain, but what happened next was no fiction. It became one of the most chilling real-life tragedies in recent memory. As the lights dimmed and the film played on screen, Joseph Jimenez sat quietly behind them. But inside his mind, something terrifying was unfolding. Jimenez wasn't just there to watch a movie. He had come armed, and sometime during the film, he made a decision that would forever change countless lives. Without warning, he raised his gun and opened fire. Riley was shot in the back of the head. Anthony was hit too. They never saw it coming. They had no chance to scream, no time to react. It was silent, sudden, and utterly senseless. Police arrived at the theater to a harrowing scene. Riley died instantly. Anthony was rushed to the hospital, clinging to life. For several days, his fans and family prayed, but those prayers weren't enough. He died from his injuries shortly after. In the blink of an eye, 2 beautiful lives were stolen. When Joseph Jimenez was arrested, he gave an explanation that only deepened the heartbreak. He claimed voices told him to do it, that schizophrenia had consumed his reality. His attorney, Charles Kenyon, insisted that Jimenez wasn't a bad man, but a sick one, that he believed he had no choice, that in his mind the theater had become a battlefield, that his family was in danger. During his insanity trial, the defense argued passionately. Kenyon said schizophrenia caused the violence, that Jimenez acted out of terror, misled by a warped reality. He was misguided by the voices. He thought he had no options. He thought his family was in danger. The defense tried to convince the judge that this was not cold-blooded murder, but the result of a broken mind. But the prosecution painted a very different picture. They pointed to Jimenez's own testimony. He admitted the voices had gone silent 20 minutes before the shooting. Yet, he still pulled the trigger. He knew Riley and Anthony were innocent. He knew they posed no threat. And still, he killed them. He fled the scene afterward, a sign the prosecution argued that he understood right from wrong. This wasn't the act of someone fully detached from reality. This was the act of someone who made a choice. Even his own lawyer admitted that Jimenez damaged his case by speaking openly on the stand. He said, "I don't think Joseph told a lie in his own mind, but the reality was, he hurt himself." There was no jury, no criminal trial, only a judge who listened to both sides and in the end declared that Joseph Jimenez was sane at the time of the murders. He will now be sentenced to state prison. He will serve time, but what he took can never be returned. For the families of Riley and Anthony, no ruling can ease the pain. No sentence can bring back the smiles, the laughter, the futures stolen. Riley was a bright student with a fierce spirit. Anthony, a rising star on social media, known for his kindness and humor. They were loved, they are mourned, and now they are missed forever. Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestron said, "This will not bring back the lives of Anthony and Riley, but it will bring a measure of justice for their families. But justice doesn't erase grief. It doesn't quiet the silence left in a home where a voice once laughed. It doesn't make birthdays easier. It doesn't erase what happened in the darkness of that theater." So we say their names again. Riley Goodrich, Anthony Barajas. Their story matters, and it must be told, not for shock, not for views, but to remind us of the lives behind the headlines, of the cruel randomness of tragedy, of the preciousness of life. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel, share this video, and leave a message for their families in the comments. Let's honor Riley and Anthony not just in memory, but in standing against senseless violence and standing with those left behind. Until next time, stay safe and hold your loved ones close.